The transport shuttle touched down at Seoul Spaceport with a soft hiss of engines. Hannah stepped onto the platform wearing clothes that felt strange on her body. The simple blue jeans and white shirt belonged to a different person. A person who existed 2 years ago, before the war changed everything. She carried only a small black bag. Inside were 3 clean shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and a metal box she would never open in front of her family. The box contained medals with names like Distinguished Service Cross and Purple Heart. Names that meant nothing to civilians but everything to the soldiers who earned them. Hannah walked through the busy spaceport like a ghost. People rushed past her talking about work and dinner plans. Their voices sounded too loud after months of tactical whispers and radio static. Her eyes moved constantly, checking corners and exits. Old habits from staying alive in places where death came without warning. The automatic doors opened, and she saw them. Her parents stood behind a metal barrier holding a welcome sign with her name. Her mother, Kim Yoo-jin, wore her best dress and had tears in her eyes. Her father, Lee Dong-woo, stood straight like he was meeting someone important. Between them was her younger brother, Park Ta-min, now 17 and taller than she remembered. Yoo-jin ran to her first. She wrapped her arms around Hannah and squeezed tight. The hug felt warm but wrong. Hannah's body went stiff for a moment before she remembered how to hug back. Her mother smelled like home cooking and vanilla perfume. Scents from a world that seemed impossibly far away. "My daughter is home," Yoo-jin whispered into her hair. "My baby girl is finally home." Hannah wanted to tell her that the baby girl died on a planet called Kepler 442 bits, that the person standing here was someone else entirely. Instead, she said, "I missed you too, Mom." Dong-woo shook her hand like she was a business partner. He had always been formal, but this felt different. Like he wasn't sure how to treat this new version of his daughter. Tai-min hung back, staring at her with wide eyes. He seemed afraid to get too close. "You look different," he said quietly. Hannah almost smiled. Different was one word for it. The girl who left home had soft hands and worried about math tests. The woman who returned had scars on her knuckles and could kill a Thekran warrior with her bare hands. Different didn't begin to cover it. They drove home through familiar streets that looked like movie sets. Everything seemed too clean, too peaceful, too normal. Hannah found herself checking rooftops for snipers that weren't there. When a motorcycle backfired 3 blocks away, she tensed and reached for a weapon that wasn't on her hip. "The news said you were coming home early," Dong-woo said, glancing at her in the mirror. "They said the war is going better now." Hannah stared out the window at children playing in a park. "Something like that," she replied. She couldn't tell him that she was sent home because she had seen too much, done too much, that even the military doctors thought she needed time to remember how to be human again. At home, Yoo-jin had prepared a feast. The dining table was covered with all of Hannah's favorite foods from before she left. Kimchi stew, bulgogi beef, fresh rice, and sweet potato pancakes. The smell made her stomach hurt with memory and hunger. They sat around the table like a normal family. Yoo-jin asked careful questions about her service. Had she made friends? Was the food okay? Did she stay warm enough? Each question showed how little they understood about where she had been. "I made some friends," Hannah said, thinking of Rodriguez who died saving a medical unit. "The food was fine," she added, remembering eating ration bars while hiding from enemy patrols. Ta-min pushed food around his plate and kept staring at her. Finally he asked, "Did you really fight aliens?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Hannah looked at her little brother's face. He still had the soft features of someone who had never seen violence. Someone who still believed that good always won and heroes always came home. "Yes," she said simply. "I did." That night, Hannah lay in her old bed staring at the ceiling. The mattress was too soft after sleeping on military bunks and alien ground. The room was too quiet without the sound of generators and distant weapons fire. Every shadow looked like an enemy soldier. Every sound made her reach for guns that weren't there. She had survived 2 years of the deadliest war in human history. She had led squads through battles that would give nightmares to grown men. She had earned the respect of alien commanders and human generals alike. But lying in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by old posters and stuffed animals, Hannah had never felt more lost in her life. 3 days after coming home, Hannah stood outside Hanging High School wearing a uniform that felt like a costume. The gray skirt and white blouse belonged to someone she used to be, someone who cared about grades and weekend parties, someone who had never held a plasma rifle or watched friends die. The school building looked smaller than she remembered. 2 years ago, it seemed huge and important. Now it looked like a toy after the massive military bases and alien structures she had seen. Students walked past her talking and laughing about normal teenage things. Their voices sounded like birds chirping after months of tactical communications and battle orders. Hannah checked her watch. Classes started in 10 minutes, but she had already been here for 30. Old military habit. Always arrive early, check the area, plan escape routes. She counted 4 exits from the main courtyard, 2 fire escapes on the side buildings, 1 emergency ladder near the gym. Hannah, oh my God, is that really you? She turned to see Sora running toward her with a huge smile. Her former best friend looked exactly the same. Long black hair in perfect waves, makeup done perfectly, school bag covered in cute stickers. Sora threw her arms around Hannah in a tight hug. I can't believe you're back, Sora said, stepping back to look at her. You look so different. Did you get taller? And your hair is so short now. Hannah touched her hair self-consciously. Military regulation cut, barely touching her collar. Yeah, it's shorter. Come on, you have to meet everyone, Sora said, grabbing her arm. The whole group is dying to see you. We have so much to catch up on. Sora led her to a group of girls standing near the main entrance. Hannah recognized some faces but couldn't remember all their names. They gathered around her like she was a celebrity, asking questions all at once. Where have you been? Why didn't you answer our messages? Did you really join the military? Are you dating anyone? The questions came too fast. Too many voices at once. Hannah felt her breathing change as her body prepared for danger that wasn't there. She forced herself to stay calm and answered with short, simple words. I was away. Phone didn't work. Yes, military service. No boyfriend. The girls seemed disappointed by her brief answers. They wanted stories and details. They wanted the old Hannah who used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. But that person was gone, left behind on a dozen different battlefields. The morning bell rang, and students moved toward the buildings. Hannah walked with Sora's group, but stayed slightly behind them. Another old habit. Never walk in the middle of a group. Always keep room to move if shooting started. Her first class was Korean literature with Mr. Park. The classroom was bright and clean with motivational posters on the walls. 25 desks arranged in neat rows, 1 window facing the courtyard. Hannah automatically chose a seat in the back corner where she could see the door and window. Mr. Park was a thin man in his 40s who spoke in a gentle voice. He welcomed her back to school and asked her to introduce herself to the class. Hannah stood up and felt 24 pairs of eyes watching her. My name is Hannah. I'm 18. I was away for military service. I'm glad to be back. She sat down quickly. The other students whispered among themselves, but she couldn't hear what they were saying. Their stares felt different from the way soldiers looked at each other. These were the stares of people who had never seen real danger trying to figure out someone who had lived in it for 2 years. During lunch, Sora's group sat at their usual table near the windows. They talked about weekend plans, upcoming tests, and who was dating whom. Hannah listened but felt like she was watching a movie about teenagers instead of actually being one. So what was it really like? Asked one girl whose name Hannah couldn't remember. Being in the military, I mean. Was it scary? Hannah looked around the cafeteria. Students laughed and threw food playfully. Teachers walked between tables making sure everyone behaved. The biggest worry here was whether someone would sit alone or if the lunch was good enough. Sometimes, she said finally. Did you meet any aliens? Another girl asked. What were they like? Hannah thought about the Thekran warriors she had fought, 7 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like metal armor, fast enough to dodge bullets and strong enough to crush human bones. She thought about the first one she killed, how its orange blood had splattered across her visor. They were different, she said. The girls wanted more details, but Hannah couldn't give them what they wanted. How could she explain watching Rodriguez die trying to save a wounded medic? How could she describe the sound a plasma cannon makes when it tears through human flesh? How could she tell them about the nightmares that still woke her up screaming? After lunch came physical education. Hannah changed into gym clothes and followed the other students to the exercise field. The PE teacher, Coach Lee, had them run laps around the track. It should have been easy for someone with military training. But running in formation with weapons and gear was different from running in shorts and sneakers. Hannah found herself checking her 6 o'clock every few steps, looking for enemies that would never come. When another student came up behind her too fast, she spun around and dropped into a defensive stance before catching herself. The student, a boy named Kim Junho, stepped back with wide eyes. Sorry, I was just trying to pass you. Hannah straightened up, feeling her face turn red. It's okay. I thought you were someone else. But Junho was already moving away, and she could see him talking to his friends and pointing at her. Great, her first day back, and she was already the weird girl who jumped at shadows. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes, curious stares and questions she couldn't answer. When the final bell rang, Hannah felt more tired than she had after 20-hour patrols in enemy territory. Sora caught up with her at the school entrance. Hey, want to come shopping with us? There's this new mall that opened last month. They have the cutest clothes. Hannah looked at her former best friend's hopeful face. Shopping for cute clothes. 2 years ago, that would have been the best part of her week. Now it sounded like torture. Maybe another time, she said. I need to get home. Sora's smile faded a little. Okay, but we should hang out soon. I feel like I don't know you anymore. That was the problem, Hannah thought as she walked to the bus stop. Sora didn't know her anymore. Nobody did. She wasn't sure she knew herself. The girl who left for war was gone. The soldier who came back didn't fit in a high school uniform. Somewhere between those two people was who she was supposed to be now. She just had to figure out how to find her. 1 week into her return to high school, Hannah sat in world history class listening to Mr. Kim talk about the current war. He stood at the front of the classroom with a digital display showing outdated battle maps and wrong information about enemy tactics. The Thekran forces primarily use ground-based attacks, Mr. Kim explained to the class. They avoid aerial combat because their technology is not advanced enough for space battles. Hannah's hand tightened around her pen. She had spent 6 months fighting Thekran air units that could tear apart human fighters like paper. She had watched their advanced ships destroy entire human colonies from orbit. Everything the teacher was saying was completely wrong. They also prefer to fight during daylight hours, Mr. Kim continued, because their eyesight is poor in darkness. That was when Hannah couldn't stay quiet anymore. She raised her hand without thinking. That's not correct, sir. The classroom went silent. Mr. Kim looked surprised. Excuse me, Miss Lee. Hannah realized every student was staring at her, but she had already started. Thekran forces do most of their attacks at night. They see better in darkness than humans do. And their air units are more advanced than ours. They can cloak their ships and strike without warning. Mr. Kim frowned. Miss Lee, I appreciate your interest, but this information comes directly from military briefings and news reports. The briefings are wrong, Hannah said, her voice getting harder, or they're old information. Thekran night vision is about 3 times better than human vision. They have heat sensors built into their helmets. Their standard attack pattern is to hit supply lines after midnight when human guards are tired. The teacher's face turned red. Young lady, I don't know where you're getting this information, but I assure you that my sources are reliable." Hannah stood up slowly. When she spoke again, her voice carried the tone she had used giving orders to combat squads. Cold, clear, and absolutely certain. "I got this information from fighting them for 18 months. I've seen their night attacks destroy 3 different human bases. I've watched their cloaked fighters take out supply convoys that thought they were safe. Your sources haven't been on the ground. They haven't seen what these creatures can really do." The classroom was completely silent now. Even Mr. Kim seemed unsure how to respond. Hannah realized she had just revealed more about her military service than she meant to. She sat back down, her face burning with embarrassment. After class, word spread quickly through the school. The quiet new girl had just schooled a teacher about alien warfare. Students whispered in the hallways and pointed at her when they thought she wasn't looking. At lunch, the situation got worse. Choi Min-ho, the football team captain and biggest bully in school, decided to test the strange new girl. He was used to intimidating smaller students and getting his way through size and aggression. Min-ho walked up to Hannah's table where she sat alone, reading a book. He was big for his age, almost 6 feet tall with broad shoulders from years of sports. 3 of his friends followed behind him like a pack of wolves. "Hey, war girl," Min-ho said loudly, making sure other students could hear. "I heard you think you're some kind of expert on fighting." Hannah looked up from her book. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, something that made nearby students take a step back without knowing why. "I'm trying to eat lunch," she said quietly. Min-ho laughed and reached for her tray, planning to dump it on the floor. It was a typical bully move that had worked on dozens of other students, but when his hand got close to the tray, Hannah's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Her grip was like a steel trap. Min-ho tried to pull away but couldn't move his arm at all. Hannah's eyes met his, and he saw something that made his blood turn cold. These weren't the eyes of a scared teenager. These were the eyes of someone who had killed before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. "Sit down," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Walk away, and don't touch my things again." Min-ho tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "Let go of me, freak." Hannah's grip tightened just enough to make him wince. "I said sit down." Something in her tone made Min-ho's survival instincts kick in. Every part of his brain screamed that he was in danger. Real danger. Not the fake tough guy posturing he was used to, but the kind of threat that could end his life. He sat down hard in the chair across from her. His friends stepped back, confused by their leader's sudden change in behavior. Hannah released his wrist and went back to her book like nothing had happened. Min-ho rubbed his wrist where her fingers had left red marks. He wanted to say something tough to save face, but the words wouldn't come. "Come on, Min-ho," one of his friends said nervously. "Let's go." Min-ho stood up slowly, never taking his eyes off Hannah. He backed away from the table like he was retreating from a dangerous animal. The other students in the cafeteria watched in amazement as the school's biggest bully was backed down by a girl half his size. After they left, Hannah tried to finish her lunch, but her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of holding back. For just a moment, she had seen Min-ho as an enemy soldier reaching for her weapon. Her body had prepared to eliminate a threat with lethal force. She closed her eyes and took deep breaths, using techniques the military psychologist had taught her. Count to 10. Remember where you are. These are not enemy combatants. This is not a battlefield. But the damage was done. By the end of the day, everyone in school knew that the quiet new girl was someone you didn't mess with. The stories grew bigger with each telling. Some said she had broken Min-ho's arm. Others claimed she was secretly a government agent. Hannah walked home alone, knowing that she had just made her already difficult situation much worse. She wasn't trying to scare anyone or cause trouble. She just wanted to finish high school and figure out how to be normal again. But normal seemed further away than ever. She was a soldier trying to pretend to be a teenager, and the pretense was falling apart. The worst part was that she could feel the predator inside her, always ready to surface when threatened. The question wasn't whether it would happen again. The question was how long she could keep it under control. 3 weeks after returning to school, Hannah was starting to think she might actually make it through without any major incidents. She kept her head down, answered questions with short replies, and tried to ignore the stares and whispers that followed her everywhere. Then came the fire drill. It was a normal Tuesday morning during second period math class. Mrs. Song was explaining algebra problems on the whiteboard when the alarm started blaring throughout the building. The sound was sharp and urgent, exactly like the proximity alerts on military bases when enemy aircraft were detected. Hannah's body reacted before her mind could catch up. She shot out of her chair, knocking it backward as her combat training took over completely. Her eyes swept the classroom, counting students, identifying exits, calculating the fastest evacuation routes. Everyone up now, she barked in the command voice she had used to move troops under fire. Exit through the main door. No talking. Move fast, but don't run. Stay low and keep moving. The other students stared at her in confusion. Mrs. Song looked annoyed at the interruption. Hannah, please sit down. This is just a drill. We wait for instructions from the principal. But Hannah wasn't hearing the teacher anymore. In her mind, the alarm meant incoming attack. Every second of delay meant more casualties. She had seen too many people die because they moved too slowly when the warnings came. There's no time to wait, Hannah said, moving to the door. In a real emergency, 30 seconds can mean the difference between life and death. Everyone needs to evacuate immediately. She opened the classroom door and looked into the hallway. Other classes were slowly filing out in the relaxed pace typical of routine drills. Students chatted with friends and teachers reminded everyone to walk, not run. It was exactly the wrong response for a real emergency. Mrs. Song walked over to her. Miss Lee, you need to calm down. This is a scheduled drill. We practice these procedures every month. Your procedures will get people killed, Hannah said flatly. Enemy forces can breach a building in less than 2 minutes. If this was real, half these students would be dead before they reached the exits. The teacher's face went pale. Enemy forces, Hannah, this is a high school in Seoul, not a battlefield. But Hannah was already moving into the hallway, her training overriding everything else. She began directing student traffic like she was evacuating a military base under attack. Her voice carried over the confused chatter. Clear the stairwells. No bottlenecks. Teachers, get your students moving faster. This is taking too long. Some students started moving faster, responding to the authority in her voice. Others just stared at the girl who was treating a routine drill like a life-or-death situation. Teachers looked between each other, unsure how to handle the disruption. Principal Yoon appeared at the end of the hallway, walking quickly toward the commotion. He was a kind man in his 50s who had seen many difficult students over the years, but nothing quite like this. Miss Lee, he called out. What seems to be the problem here? Hannah turned to face him, and he was surprised by what he saw. Her face was completely focused, her posture tense and ready for action. She looked like a soldier preparing for battle, not a student participating in a safety drill. Sir, your evacuation procedures are inadequate, she said in a crisp, professional tone. Current pace would result in significant casualties in a real emergency. Students need to move faster, and teachers need better crowd control training. Principal Yoon blinked. No student had ever criticized school safety procedures with such military precision. Miss Lee, this is just a practice drill. Everyone is safe. Practice how you fight. Hannah replied automatically, quoting military doctrine. If you practice slow, you'll be slow when it matters. I've seen bases overrun because people thought they had more time than they did. The principal studied her face and began to understand. This wasn't a troublemaker acting out for attention. This was someone whose experiences had taught her that safety drills weren't games. Someone who had lived through situations where seconds mattered and mistakes meant death. Why don't you come to my office after the drill, he said gently. We can discuss this properly. The rest of the evacuation continued without incident, but word spread quickly about Hannah's reaction. Students whispered about how she had taken charge like a military officer. Teachers talked quietly about the intensity in her voice and the way she had moved with such purpose. An hour later, Hannah sat in Principal Yoon's office facing not just him, but also Dr. Nam Eunji, the school counselor. Dr. Nam was a cheerful woman in her 30s who specialized in teenage psychology. She had dealt with everything from academic stress to family problems, but military trauma was outside her experience. "Hannah," Dr. Nam said with a warm smile, "Principal Yoon told me about what happened during the drill. It sounds like you were really worried about everyone's safety." "The procedures are wrong," Hannah said simply. "People will die if they follow them in a real emergency." Dr. Nam leaned forward. "But this isn't a war zone, dear. This is a safe school in a peaceful city. Sometimes when we've been through stressful experiences, we can start seeing danger where there isn't any." Hannah's jaw tightened. The counselor was talking to her like she was a confused child having nightmares, not a combat veteran who had lived through more real emergencies than most adults would ever see. "I've seen what happens when people aren't prepared," Hannah said, her voice getting colder. "I've pulled bodies out of buildings that collapsed because evacuation took too long. I've watched good people die because they thought they were safe." Dr. Nam's smile became more forced. "I understand you feel that way, but sometimes our minds can play tricks on us after traumatic events. You might be experiencing what we call hypervigilance, where everything seems like a threat even when it's not." "Are you saying I'm imagining things?" "Not imagining, exactly. But perhaps your reactions are a bit excessive for the situation. This kind of response could be a way of getting attention after feeling overlooked or—" Hannah stood up abruptly. "You think I'm acting out for attention? Well, returning to school after time away can be difficult. Sometimes students feel like they need to prove themselves or—" Hannah walked to the door without another word. Dr. Nam called after her, but she was already gone. She couldn't sit in that room for another second listening to someone who had never seen real danger tell her that her experiences weren't real. Principal Yoon found her sitting on a bench outside the main office 20 minutes later. She was staring at the ground, her hands clenched into fists. "She doesn't understand," Hannah said without looking up. "No," the principal agreed, sitting down beside her. "She doesn't, but I'm starting to." Hannah looked at him with surprise. Principal Yoon had served in the military himself, though during peacetime decades ago. He recognized something in her that the counselor had missed. "You're not acting out for attention," he said quietly. "You're trying to keep people alive. That's what soldiers do." For the first time since coming home, someone had actually understood. Hannah felt tears building in her eyes, but fought them back. "I don't know how to turn it off," she admitted. "Maybe you don't need to turn it off," Principal Yoon said. "Maybe you just need to find the right place for it." He didn't have all the answers, but at least he was asking the right questions. That was more than anyone else had given her since she came home. 2 days after the fire drill incident, the entire school gathered in the main auditorium for a mandatory assembly about the war effort. Hannah sat in the back row, trying to stay invisible while Principal Yoon spoke about supporting human forces fighting across the galaxy. "Today we honor all the brave young men and women serving our species in these difficult times," Principal Yoon announced from the stage. "We're going to watch a special news report about recent victories against the Thekran Empire." The lights dimmed, and a large screen dropped down from the ceiling. The school's logo disappeared and was replaced by the Global Defense Network news channel. A serious-looking reporter appeared on screen standing in front of a military base. "Good morning. I'm reporting from Firebase Delta on Kepler 442 bits, where human forces have achieved a significant victory against Thekran ground troops." Hannah's stomach dropped. She knew Firebase Delta. She had lived there for 8 months. The reporter was standing exactly where she used to eat breakfast before morning patrols. This victory was made possible by the heroic actions of several young soldiers, including this remarkable footage captured during the battle. The screen switched to helmet camera video. Shaky combat footage showed a squad of human soldiers pinned down behind damaged vehicles, while orange plasma bolts flew overhead. The audio crackled with radio chatter and weapons fire. "Ghost Walker, this is Bravo Squad," a panicked voice called over the radio. "We're trapped behind the transport. 3 wounded. Need immediate assistance." Hannah recognized the voice. Corporal Martinez from the 7th Infantry, a good soldier who had saved her life twice during their deployment. On screen, the camera shook as someone moved through the battlefield. The footage showed armored boots running across broken ground while enemy fire exploded around them. Whoever was wearing the camera moved with incredible speed and precision, using destroyed vehicles and debris for cover. "Copy that, Bravo Squad," came a calm female voice over the radio. "Ghost Walker en route. Keep your heads down." Hannah's blood turned to ice. That was her voice, her call sign. The students around her were watching footage of her in combat. The camera rounded a corner, and 3 Thekran warriors came into view. They were massive creatures, 7 feet tall with 4 arms and metallic skin that could stop small arms fire. One of them was advancing on the trapped human squad with a plasma cannon. What happened next took less than 30 seconds but felt like forever. The camera wearer moved like a shadow, using the terrain to approach unseen. A combat knife appeared in the bottom of the frame, followed by the distinctive whine of a plasma rifle charging. The first Thekran went down with a knife between its shoulder plates before it knew anyone was there. The second turned just in time to catch a plasma bolt center mass. The third managed to raise its weapon before 3 quick shots dropped it to the ground. "Bravo Squad, this is Ghost Walker," the voice on the recording said. "Area secure. Moving to your position." The footage switched to a wider angle shot taken from a drone overhead. It showed a small figure in human combat armor leading a group of wounded soldiers to safety while providing covering fire. The figure moved with the confidence of someone who had done this dozens of times before. "The soldier you just watched," the reporter continued, "is 18-year-old Private Lee Hannah from Seoul, South Korea. In just 18 months of service, she has been awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Purple Hearts, and the Galactic Defense Medal for extraordinary heroism." The auditorium erupted in shocked whispers. Every head in the room turned to look at the back row, where Hannah sat frozen in her seat. Her face had gone completely white, and her hands were shaking. Private Lee, known by her call sign Ghost Walker, is credited with saving over 40 human lives during her deployment. She has eliminated more than 30 enemy combatants and led 17 successful rescue missions behind enemy lines. Sora's mouth hung open as she stared at her former best friend. Minho, the bully who had backed down from her just days before, looked like he was going to be sick. Teachers whispered to each other, while students pulled out their phones to record Hannah's reaction. "Ghost Walker has become something of a legend among human forces," the reporter went on. "Her ability to move unseen through enemy territory and strike without warning has earned her the respect of both human and allied alien commanders." The footage switched to an interview with Commander Raktel, a tall alien with blue skin and 4 eyes. The subtitles showed him speaking in accented but clear English. "Lead Hannah is example of best human qualities," the alien commander said. "Brave, smart, never gives up. My species has warriors with 100 years experience who respect her skills. She fights not for glory, but to protect others. This is why humans will win this war." Hannah couldn't take any more. She stood up and walked quickly toward the exit, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed her. Principal Yoon tried to catch her eye from the stage, but she was already pushing through the auditorium doors. She made it to the bathroom before the shaking got worse. She locked herself in a stall and sat down on the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. The walls felt like they were closing in. The sound of the ventilation system reminded her of air recyclers on military transports. 5 minutes later, she heard the bathroom door open. Footsteps approached her stall. "Hannah," it was Sora's voice, uncertain and worried. "Are you okay?" "Go away," Hannah managed to say. I can't believe that was really you on the screen. I mean, I knew you joined the military, but I didn't know you were. What? A killer? Hannah's voice was bitter. Someone who's good at hurting people. A hero, Sora said quietly. I didn't know you were a hero. Hannah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Heroes are what they call people who survive when everyone else dies. There's nothing heroic about watching your friends get torn apart by alien weapons. The stall door opened. Sora had climbed under it and was now sitting on the floor beside her. She looked scared but determined. You saved those soldiers in the video, Sora said. You risked your life for them. I did my job, Hannah replied. That's what soldiers do. We follow orders and try to keep each other alive. But the reporter said you volunteered for the dangerous missions. Nobody ordered you to do that. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Someone had to, and I was good at it. Sora reached out carefully and took her hand. I'm sorry I didn't understand before. I'm sorry I complained about stupid things like tests and homework when you were fighting for all of us. You couldn't have known, Hannah said. I couldn't tell you. Why not? Hannah looked at her old friend, really looked at her for the first time since coming home. Sora's face was full of concern and something else. Respect maybe, or fear. Hannah wasn't sure which was worse. Because once people know what you've done, Hannah said, they never look at you the same way again. They either treat you like a hero or a monster, but they never just treat you like a person. Through the bathroom walls, they could hear the assembly continuing. The reporter was probably showing more footage, telling more stories about the war. But sitting on the bathroom floor, Hannah felt more exposed than she ever had on any battlefield. The secret was out now. Everyone knew who she really was. The news about Hannah spread through the school faster than wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew that the quiet girl in their classes was Ghost Walker, the legendary war hero from the news reports. But knowing who she was made everything more complicated, not easier. Some students treated her like a celebrity. They followed her in the hallways asking for autographs and selfies. They wanted her to tell war stories and describe what it felt like to kill aliens. They acted like her military service was exciting entertainment instead of the traumatic experience it had been. Can you show us some combat moves? Asked a boy named Lee Jae-won during lunch break. He had gathered a small crowd around Hannah's table, all of them staring at her with eager faces. Please, Hannah said quietly, not looking up from her food. I just want to eat. Come on, pressed another student. Just one demonstration. We promise we won't tell anyone. Hannah's grip tightened on her chopsticks. These kids thought war was like a video game where death didn't matter and violence was fun. They didn't understand that every move she knew was designed to end lives quickly and efficiently. I said no, she repeated, her voice getting harder. The students finally backed away, but she could feel them watching her and whispering. To them, she had become a living action movie instead of a person trying to heal. Other students had the opposite reaction. They were afraid of her now that they knew what she was capable of. They crossed to the other side of hallways when they saw her coming. They spoke in hushed voices about what she might do if someone made her angry. During PE class, nobody wanted to be her partner for exercises. When Coach Lee divided them into teams for volleyball, both sides tried to avoid having her join them. It wasn't because she was bad at sports. It was because they were scared of what those hands had done. Min-ho, the bully who had confronted her weeks before, now looked physically sick whenever he saw her. He knew how close he had come to serious harm when he grabbed for her lunch tray. The thought of what she could have done to him kept him awake at night. The teachers weren't much better. They handled her like she was made of explosives that might go off at any moment. Mr. Kim, her history teacher, actually apologized for correcting her about Thekran tactics. He had looked up her service record and discovered she was right about everything. I'm sorry, Miss Lee, he said after class one day. I should have listened to your expertise. But his apology felt wrong somehow. He wasn't treating her like a student anymore. He was treating her like a dangerous expert who needed to be carefully managed. The only person who seemed to understand was a quiet boy named Oh Jinwoo from her Korean literature class. He was thin and wore thick glasses, the kind of student who usually got picked on by bullies like Minho. Most people barely noticed he existed. Jinwoo approached her one afternoon while she sat alone in the library. He carried a worn book about military history and sat down across from her without asking permission. "My grandfather served in the Third Border War," he said quietly. "He told me that the hardest part wasn't the fighting. It was coming home and pretending everything was normal." Hannah looked up from her homework, surprised. Nobody had mentioned anything about family military service before. "He said people either wanted him to be a hero or they wanted him to disappear," Jinwoo continued. "Nobody wanted him to just be a person who had seen difficult things." "What did he do?" Hannah asked. "He found other veterans to talk to. People who understood without needing explanations." Jinwoo pushed his glasses up his nose. He said it took years to feel normal again. But he did feel normal eventually. For the first time in weeks, Hannah felt a small spark of hope. Maybe there was a way forward that didn't involve being either worshipped or feared. Jinwoo introduced her to 3 other students who had family members in military service. They formed a small group that met during lunch breaks, not to talk about war stories, but to discuss normal teenage things. They treated her like Hannah instead of Ghost Walker. But even with this small group of understanding friends, Hannah felt more isolated than ever. The gap between her experiences and everyone else's seemed impossible to bridge. She had seen things that most adults would never experience. She had made decisions that shaped the course of battles across multiple star systems. Walking through school hallways filled with teenagers worried about tests and dating felt like visiting another planet. Their problems seemed impossibly small compared to watching friends die in alien attacks. Their excitement about weekend parties felt meaningless after spending months not knowing if she would survive the next day. Sora tried her best to maintain their friendship, but even she struggled with the new reality. She invited Hannah to shopping trips and sleepovers, but everything felt forced now. How do you complain about homework to someone who planned military operations? How do you gossip about classmates with someone who had led combat squads? "I don't know what to talk about anymore," Sora admitted one day after school. They were walking to the bus stop together, but the comfortable conversations they used to have were gone. "Talk about normal things," Hannah said. "Pretend I'm the same person I was before." "But you're not," Sora replied honestly. "And I don't want to pretend you didn't do amazing things. I just don't know how to be friends with a war hero." That was the problem. Everyone knew about Ghost Walker now, but nobody knew how to be friends with her. They saw the medals and the news reports, but they didn't see the nightmares or the way her hands shook sometimes when she remembered fallen comrades. The school counselor, Dr. Nam, tried to schedule more sessions with her, but Hannah refused. After their last meeting, where Dr. Nam suggested she was seeking attention, trust was impossible to rebuild. Principal Yoon checked on her regularly, but even his understanding had limits. He was sympathetic, but he had never experienced combat. His military service had been during peacetime, managing supplies and paperwork. At home, her family tried to act normal, but the tension was obvious. Her parents were proud of her service but worried about her future. Tai Min treated her like she might break apart at any moment. Everyone walked on eggshells around the war hero in their house. 1 month after the assembly revelation, Hannah sat alone on the school roof during lunch break. She had found a spot where students weren't allowed to go, giving her some peace from the stares and whispers. She looked out over the city where she had grown up. The buildings looked the same, but everything felt different now. She was home, but she didn't belong here anymore. She was surrounded by people, but more alone than she had ever been. The girl who left for war was gone. The soldier who fought for humanity's survival was famous. But the person trying to exist between those two identities felt lost in a world that couldn't understand her. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what normal felt like. But normal was becoming harder to imagine with each passing day. The earthquake hit Seoul at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon during chemistry class. Hana was sitting in the back row taking notes when the ground began to shake. At first, it felt like a large truck passing by the building. Then the shaking got stronger. The fluorescent lights swayed overhead, and glass beakers started sliding across lab tables. Students looked around nervously as their desks began to vibrate. Mr. Cho, the chemistry teacher, grabbed onto his demonstration table as it started moving across the floor. "Everyone stay calm," Mr. Cho called out, but his voice was shaking along with everything else. "Get under your desks and cover your heads." Most students scrambled under their tables, following the earthquake drill they had practiced. But Hana remained standing, her military training taking over. She scanned the room quickly, noting the large windows, the heavy equipment, and the emergency exits. The shaking intensified. Books fell from shelves, and one of the windows cracked with a sharp sound like gunfire. Several students screamed as ceiling tiles began falling around them. This wasn't just a minor tremor. This was a major earthquake. "The building isn't safe," Hana said loudly, her voice cutting through the panic. "Everyone needs to evacuate now." Mr. Cho looked up from under his desk. "The procedure is to shelter in place until the shaking stops." "The procedure is wrong," Hana replied, moving toward the door. "This building is old concrete. If it fails, being under a desk won't help. We need to get outside while we still can." A loud crack came from somewhere above them. Dust fell from the ceiling as the building swayed dangerously. Hana could hear the structural supports groaning under stress. She had seen buildings collapse under bombardment. The sounds were exactly the same. "Everyone up," she commanded, using the tone that had moved soldiers through battlefields. "Form a line at the door. No pushing. Move fast, but stay together." Some students started to stand, responding to the authority in her voice. Others remained frozen under their desks, too scared to move. Mr. Cho was torn between following emergency procedures and trusting the war veteran in his classroom. Another piece of ceiling crashed down near the windows. That decided it for everyone. "Do what she says," Mr. Cho shouted. "Everyone to the door." Hana positioned herself at the classroom entrance, directing students into the hallway like she was managing an evacuation under fire. She kept count as they passed, making sure nobody was left behind. "You three, stay together," she told a group of girls who were crying. Jinwoo helped carry Min-soo's bag. He hurt his ankle. The hallway was chaos. Students from other classes were streaming out of rooms while teachers tried to maintain order. But most of the adults seemed paralyzed by the disaster, unsure what to do when their normal procedures weren't working. Hana took charge without thinking about it. She began organizing the evacuation like a military operation, assigning roles and creating order from panic. "Teachers, count your students," she called out. "Anyone with first aid training, check for injuries. Everyone else, move toward the main stairwell, but don't crowd it." Min Ho appeared beside her, looking scared but determined. "What can I do?" A month ago, he had been the school bully who tried to intimidate her. Now he was asking for orders from someone he recognized as a leader. "Take 5 people and check the second-floor bathrooms," Hana told him. "Make sure nobody is trapped. Report back in 3 minutes." Min Ho nodded and ran off with a group of volunteers. Other students began following Hana's directions without question. In a crisis, people naturally looked for someone who seemed to know what they were doing. The building shook again, harder this time. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power failed. Through the windows, Hana could see that several other buildings in the area had suffered damage. This was a citywide disaster. Sora found her way to Hana's side, pale but trying to help. "The stairwell is getting crowded. Some younger students are panicking." "Go calm them down," Hana said. "Tell them everything will be okay if they follow instructions. Jinwoo, go with her. You're good with scared kids." As they worked to evacuate the building, something changed in how people looked at Hana. The stares and whispers were gone. Instead, there was respect and gratitude. Teachers who had been nervous around her now listened to her suggestions without question. Principal Yoon appeared on the second floor, coordinating with emergency services on his radio. When he saw Hannah directing the evacuation, he walked over to her. "What's the situation?" he asked, speaking to her like a fellow professional instead of a student. "Main building is clear except for the east wing," Hannah reported. "Minho's team is checking the second floor. We have 3 minor injuries, no serious casualties. Estimated 5 minutes to complete evacuation." The principal nodded. "Emergency services are overwhelmed. Several buildings collapsed downtown. We're on our own for now." "Understood. We can handle it." And they did handle it. Under Hannah's leadership, the school evacuated completely in 12 minutes with no serious injuries. She organized first aid stations, assigned people to check on elderly neighbors, and set up communication with worried parents. When the emergency responders finally arrived an hour later, they found a perfectly organized disaster response led by an 18-year-old girl in a school uniform. The fire chief, a veteran named Captain Park, shook Hannah's hand with genuine respect. "I've seen professional emergency teams take longer to get organized. Where did you learn disaster management?" "Military training," Hannah replied simply. Captain Park nodded like that explained everything. "Well, you probably saved lives today. That old building could have collapsed if people had stayed inside much longer." As the immediate crisis passed, Hannah looked around at her classmates and teachers. They were dirty and shaken, but they were all safe. More importantly, they were looking at her differently now. Minho walked up to her, still covered in dust from searching the damaged areas. "I wanted to say thank you for letting me help, for trusting me with something important." "You did good work," Hannah told him. "You kept your team calm and got everyone out safely." Minho's face lit up with pride. A month ago, he had measured his worth by how much he could intimidate others. Today, he had discovered what it felt like to protect people instead. Sora appeared beside them, exhausted but smiling. "You were amazing. I've never seen anything like it. You turned complete chaos into organized rescue." "We all did it together," Hannah corrected. "I just helped coordinate." But that wasn't entirely true, and everyone knew it. Without her military training and leadership experience, the evacuation would have taken much longer and been far more dangerous. For the first time since revealing her identity, Hannah felt like her war experience had been truly useful in civilian life. She wasn't just the scary girl with too much combat training anymore. She was someone who could protect her community when they needed it most. The earthquake had tested everyone in the school, but it had also shown them who Hannah really was beneath the medals and news reports. She was someone who stepped forward when others stepped back. Someone who turned chaos into order and fear into action. Someone who used her strength to protect others instead of intimidating them. As they waited for parents to pick them up, Hannah realized that she finally felt like she belonged somewhere again. The earthquake made national news, but this time the story was different. Instead of focusing on Ghost Walker, the war hero, reporters wanted to know about Lee Hannah, the emergency leader who had saved her school. 3 days after the disaster, news crews arrived at Hanging High School to interview students and teachers about the evacuation. Principal Yoon had called Hannah to his office to prepare her for the attention. "They want to interview you," he explained. "But this time, I think you should tell your story the way you want it told." The reporter was a professional woman named Kim Soo-jin who specialized in human interest stories. Unlike the previous coverage that focused on combat footage, she seemed genuinely interested in understanding Hannah as a person. "Tell me about that day," Kim Soo-jin said as cameras rolled. "What went through your mind when the earthquake started?" Hannah thought carefully before answering. "I saw people in danger. My training taught me how to help them get to safety. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about doing what needed to be done." Students here say you transformed from a quiet classmate into a confident leader in seconds. How do you explain that change? I didn't change, Hannah replied. I just used skills I already had. The military taught me how to stay calm in emergencies and organize people effectively. Those skills work whether you're on a battlefield or in a school. The interview continued for 20 minutes. Kim Soo-jin asked thoughtful questions about adjusting to civilian life, dealing with trauma, and finding purpose after military service. For the first time, Hannah felt like someone was trying to understand her complete story instead of just the exciting parts. When the news segment aired that evening, it painted a different picture of Hannah than previous coverage. Instead of focusing on alien battles and combat footage, it showed her helping classmates, organizing evacuation routes, and providing first aid to injured students. The story spread beyond Seoul. Other news outlets picked it up, turning Hannah into an example of how military veterans could contribute to civilian communities. Letters arrived from young people across Korea and other human colonies, thanking her for her service and asking for advice about their own challenges. More importantly, the coverage changed how people at school saw her. Instead of the dangerous war hero they had feared or the celebrity they had bothered for autographs, they began to see her as someone who could help them when things went wrong. A week after the interview aired, Principal Yoon called another meeting. This time, he wasn't alone. Dr. Nam, the counselor, was there, along with 2 members of the school board and a representative from the Ministry of Education. Hannah, Principal Yoon began, "We've been discussing your situation, and we think we have a solution that might work better for everyone." The ministry representative, a serious woman named Lee Maidong, leaned forward. "We're starting a new program for young veterans who want to complete their education while contributing their skills. Instead of traditional classes, you would help develop emergency preparedness programs for schools across the region." Hannah blinked in surprise. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you would work with school administrators to improve evacuation procedures, train teachers in crisis management, and help students understand real emergency response," Dr. Nam explained. "You would earn full academic credit while using your military experience constructively. Think of it as being a bridge between military and civilian worlds," Principal Yoon added. "You could help other schools avoid the problems we had during the earthquake." The offer was tempting. Instead of sitting through math and literature classes that felt meaningless after her experiences, she would be doing work that actually mattered, work that could save lives. "There's more," Lee My-yum continued. "This program would also connect you with other young veterans facing similar adjustment challenges. You wouldn't be the only one trying to figure out how to use military skills in civilian life." That decided it for Hannah. The idea of meeting other people who understood her experiences was worth more than any traditional diploma. "I accept," she said. Her first assignment was redesigning Hanging High School's emergency procedures. Principal Yoon gave her access to building plans, safety equipment inventories, and previous drill records. For the first time since coming home, Hannah felt like she was using her brain for something important. She spent hours walking through the building, identifying weak points and planning better evacuation routes. She timed different scenarios and calculated how long various procedures would take with different numbers of people. Min-ho volunteered to help with her research. The former bully had been transformed by his experience during the earthquake. He asked intelligent questions and took detailed notes as Hannah explained proper emergency response techniques. "Why do you think the old procedures were so bad?" he asked one afternoon as they tested stairwell capacity. "They were designed by people who never experienced real emergencies," Hannah explained. "They looked good on paper, but didn't account for how people actually behave when they're scared." Jin Woo joined their team, along with several other students who were genuinely interested in learning. They formed a student emergency response club that met twice a week to practice drills and learn first aid. Sora surprised everyone by becoming one of the most dedicated members. "I want to understand what you do," she told Hannah. "I want to be someone who can help instead of someone who needs to be helped." The friendship that had seemed impossible to rebuild began growing into something new. Instead of trying to recapture who they used to be, They built a relationship based on who they were now. At home, the changes were just as significant. Tae-min started asking Hana real questions about leadership and responsibility instead of treating her like she might break. Their parents relaxed as they saw her finding purpose and direction again. "You seem more like yourself," her mother Yoo-jin observed one evening over dinner. Not the girl who left, but not the stranger who came back either. Someone new. Hana nodded. "I think I'm figuring out who that someone is." 2 months after starting the new program, Hana received a video call from her old unit. Commander Rodriguez, who had survived his injuries and returned to active duty, appeared on screen with several familiar faces. "Ghost Walker," he said with a grin. "Heard you're still saving people, just in a different uniform now." "Something like that," Hana replied, smiling for the first time in months. "How's the war going?" "Better, thanks to training programs based on your tactical reports. But that's not why I called. I wanted you to know that what you're doing matters. Teaching civilians how to protect themselves, building bridges between military and civilian communities, that's just as important as what we're doing out here." After the call ended, Hana sat in her room thinking about how much had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a lost war veteran trying to pretend she was still a normal teenager. Now she was something entirely new. She was still Lee Hana from Seoul. She was still Ghost Walker, the decorated soldier. But she was also becoming someone who could use her experiences to make the world safer for everyone. The integration wasn't complete yet. She still had nightmares sometimes and struggled with crowds. But for the first time since coming home, she could see a future that made sense. She had found her place between two worlds. 6 months later, Hana stood at the podium in Hanging High School's main auditorium, looking out at the graduating class. The same room where her identity as Ghost Walker had been revealed now hosted a very different kind of assembly. Today, she wasn't the subject of a news report about war heroes. She was the keynote speaker for graduation day, addressing students who had learned to see her as more than just a soldier or a legend. In the audience, she could see familiar faces. Min-ho sat in the 3rd row, wearing his graduation cap and the emergency responder badge he had earned through her program. Sora was in the front section, having been elected class president after organizing several successful charity drives for war relief. Jinwoo was graduating with highest honors and had already been accepted to military academy, inspired by Hana's example of service. Tae-min sat with their parents, proud of his sister, but no longer afraid of who she had become. Principal Yoon introduced her with words that would have seemed impossible when she first returned to school. "Our speaker today has shown us that strength comes not from what we can destroy, but from what we choose to protect." Hana approached the microphone, wearing a simple blue dress instead of military uniform. The medals and awards she had earned were back home in their box. Today wasn't about Ghost Walker, the war hero. Today was about Hana, the teacher, mentor, and bridge between worlds. "When I first came back to this school," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium, "I thought I had to choose between being a soldier or being a student. I thought my experiences in the war made me too different to belong in a normal place like this." She paused, remembering those first difficult weeks when everything seemed impossible. "I was wrong. The choice wasn't between being a soldier or a civilian. The choice was between using my experiences to build walls or using them to build bridges." In the audience, Dr. Nam smiled. The school counselor had eventually learned to work with veterans instead of trying to fit them into normal teenage psychology. Her sessions with Hana had become training opportunities for dealing with other young people facing extraordinary circumstances. "Some of you will face difficult choices in the coming years," Hana continued. "Our war with the Thekran Empire is ending, but there will always be new challenges. Some of you might choose military service. Others will find different ways to serve your communities." A special guest sat in the back of the auditorium. Commander Raktel, the alien officer who had fought alongside human forces, had specifically requested to attend this graduation. The tall, blue-skinned alien listened with 4 eyes focused intently on Hannah's words. "What matters isn't the path you choose," Hannah said. "What matters is that you remember why humans are worth protecting. Not because we're the strongest species in the galaxy. Not because we have the best weapons or the fastest ships." She thought about all the battles she had fought, all the friends she had lost, and all the reasons she had kept fighting when everything seemed hopeless. We're worth protecting because we never stop trying to be better. Because we help each other even when it's difficult. Because we can take someone who seems dangerous or different and find a way to make them part of our community. Minho felt tears in his eyes as he remembered how Hannah had trusted him with important work during the earthquake, despite their hostile first meeting. Sora thought about how their friendship had grown stronger by accepting change instead of fighting it. "The war taught me that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology or our tactics. It's our ability to adapt and grow while holding on to the things that make us human. Compassion, courage, the willingness to sacrifice for others." Commander Rachtel nodded approvingly. In his experience fighting alongside many species, humans were unique in their capacity for both fierce warfare and deep empathy. They could be deadly enemies or loyal allies, depending on how they were treated. "I won't lie to you," Hannah continued. "The experiences that change us aren't always easy to carry. Some of you have already faced challenges that aged you beyond your years. Others will face them in the future." She looked directly at several students she knew were considering military service, including Jinwoo and 2 others who had joined her emergency response program. "But here's what I learned from all of you over the past months. The experiences that change us don't have to define us. We can choose what to do with what we've learned. We can use our strength to hurt others or to protect them. We can use our knowledge to divide communities or to bring them together." The auditorium was completely silent except for her voice. Even the teachers and parents seemed captivated by her words. "When I was fighting on distant planets, I carried something with me that kept me going through the worst battles. It wasn't my weapons or my armor. It was the memory of ordinary people living ordinary lives. People going to school, making friends, falling in love, building families." She smiled, looking out at faces that had become familiar and important to her. "You are what I was fighting to protect. Not just as humans, but as individuals with dreams and hopes, and the right to pursue them safely. That's what makes all the sacrifice worthwhile." As she spoke these final words, a message arrived on the auditorium's communication system. Principal Yoon quietly checked his tablet and smiled. The peace treaty with the Thekran Empire had just been signed. The war was officially over. "Today you graduate into a universe that is safer than it was when I first left for military service," Hannah concluded. "Tomorrow, some of you will work to make it even safer for the next generation. Whether you do that as soldiers, teachers, doctors, or in any other profession, remember that your strength comes from your humanity." The applause was thunderous. Students, teachers, parents, and even Commander Rachtel stood to honor not just her words but the journey she had taken to reach this point. After the ceremony, Hannah was surrounded by graduates and their families wanting to thank her or ask for advice. But the moment that mattered most came when a young girl, maybe 8 years old, tugged on her dress. "Are you really Ghost Walker?" the child asked with wide eyes. Hannah knelt down to the girl's level. "I used to be. Now I'm just Hannah. What's your name?" "I'm Park Soo-jin. My big brother is graduating today. He says you taught him how to be brave." Hannah looked up and saw Minho approaching with a proud smile and grateful parents. The boy who had once tried to bully her was now someone who protected younger students and helped during emergencies. "Your brother taught me things too," Hannah told Soo-jin. "He taught me that people can change and grow into something better than they were before." As the crowd began to disperse, Sora joined her longtime friend. "So what's next for you?" Hannah looked around the auditorium where she had faced her greatest challenges and found her greatest victories. "The ministry wants me to help start veteran integration programs in other cities. There are a lot of young soldiers coming home who need to find their place." "Will you miss this place?" Hannah thought about everything that had happened in these halls. The misunderstandings, the fear, the breakthrough moments, and finally the acceptance. I'll miss the people, but I think I'm ready for the next mission. 6 months ago, Lee Hannah had been a lost war veteran trying to fit into a world that didn't understand her. Today, she was someone who could help others navigate the same difficult journey. The war had changed her, but high school had taught her something just as important. Change didn't have to mean loss. Sometimes it meant becoming exactly who you were meant to be.